In progress.
He's presented to diverse audiences for over 40 years and been a Toastmaster for the past 29 years. Today, he will share his thoughts about creating your unique keynote. He asks that everybody have a paper and pen ready for this presentation. Fellow Toastmasters, please help me welcome a multi-talented presenter, Solarzar Dellaporta.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, and thank you, all of you, for being here today. So let me ask you a question. What is the purpose of a keynote? And what hot tips can I offer to help you create your keynote? What do I bring to the table that you already haven't heard? All of you practicing on your professional presentations, your training, your skill set. So let me share a little bit about me. I'm originally from New York. I went to Catholic grammar school, was an honor student. Then I went to Cardinal Spellman High School in the Bronx on a scholarship. Now, at the age of 16, my father and I had a disagreement about a haircut. The disagreement became an argument. The argument became a fight. At the age of 16, on a cold, wet East Coast February night during a snowstorm, I was put out of the house with an overcoat, a few things thrown into a carry bag, and 16 cents. I lived on the streets for over 2 years. I kept myself alive by doing various things. I worked at an offset printing plant. I did odd jobs. I painted houses. I did pickup labor. I even did some street performances. Now, 2 years later, my father and I reconciled and I returned home. I joined the Marine Corps and went through the enlisted ranks to the officer ranks before retiring in 1994. Now, I was trained in the techniques of military instruction, and after retiring, I joined Toastmasters, and I was also certified as a master trainer through the training clinic. I've presented for audiences of up to 800 at quarterly conferences. I've facilitated for the Veterans Administration, the Department of Defense, the Defense Accounting Services, the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Army, Electronic Data Systems, 3M corporations, and hundreds of other presentations, both in and out of Toastmasters. And as I said in the beginning, with that background, I'm so tired, so I'm done. Thanks so much for having me today. Bye-bye. But let's return to my opening question. What's the purpose of a keynote? Don't answer out loud, but think of it. I mean, keynotes are designed to be engaging, have the purpose of informing, educating, motivating, or inspiring an audience. There's no one secret to a great presentation. It's all about preparation, delivery, and variety. But how do you know what to speak about in your keynote? What's your expertise? Now, A.H. Alma's, the founder of the Diamond Approach to Spiritual Psychology, said, to contact the deeper truth of who we are, we must engage in some activity or practice that questions what we assume to be true about ourselves. Let me share a story about someone who questioned the truth about himself. His name is Stan Cottrell. He grew up poor in the backwoods of Kentucky. Now, at the age of 5, after a summer afternoon thunderstorm, he stood in a field with his father, looking at a brilliant rainbow arching across the horizon. He reached up, took his father's hand, and said, "Daddy, one day I'm going to grab the end of that rainbow and wrap my arms around it." Now, Stan Cottrell didn't have much going for him. As a matter of fact, he never even saw a flush toilet till he was in his 20s. But he loved to run, and over the course of his lifetime, he ran over 200,000 distance miles. He ran across Europe. He ran across America, and in the 1980s, based on a personal goal, he ran the Great Wall of China. Now, from the moment he conceived the idea of running the Great Wall of China, Stan Cottrell believed it would only take 6 months, maybe a year, to get permission, funding, and have everything in place. But this was the middle of the 1980s. It was the height of the Cold War. It took him over 5 years. He had to get 50 letters of recommendations from senators and congressmen. He had to get permission from the US State Department. He had to get permission from the People's Republic of China. He had to get permission from the Chinese Sports Agency. He had to get a support team, and he had to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. Stan Cottrell approached 1,900 individuals and corporations, and he was turned down 1,858 times. But he persisted. Finally, he had the permissions, he had the funding, and he had the support. And he went to China, and he ran the navigable portion of the Great Wall of China. He ran 2,125 miles. He ran the equivalent of 40 miles a day for 53 consecutive days. He ran through all types of weather. He ran 1,000 of those miles with 2 cracked vertebrae. He went from 140 pounds to 123. And he learned something profound. When everything you have as a reference point has been taken away and can no longer be depended upon, you come to the moment of truth within yourself. Our moment of truth is to question what we assume to be true about ourselves, to know that we have more skills than we realize. Recently, I was listening to comedian Taylor Tomlinson. Now, she admitted she admires serial killers. She said, unlike her boyfriend, serial killers know how to plan. She felt certain Ted Bundy would remember her birthday, or Jeffrey Dahmer could plan a birthday party for her, unlike her boyfriend. Now, I'm not suggesting we be serial killers, but if there's something in your life that you find easy to do, then that's a skill you have that others may not have. We often discount those things because they come so easy to us. And we forget sometimes that our way to relate to other people is by relating our skill to their skill. You know, adults learn best by taking new knowledge and attaching it to old knowledge, and we call that Velcro learning. And we can often create that connection by dealing with a skill that we have. Now, I did ask that you have a paper and pen handy, and I'd like you to take the paper and draw a line down the middle of the page from the top to the bottom. Please go ahead and do that right now. Now, on the left-hand side of the paper, write 3 to 5 items, no more than that, that you're good at. I mean, do you draw? Do you write? Do you garden? Are you a good cook? Are you a good decorator? Are you a good planner? Maybe, again, not at the serial killer level, but good nonetheless. Are you a good driver? Are you a good parent? Are you a good negotiator between children? Are you a caring friend? Are you a film buff? Are you a music aficionado? Are you a good organizer? Just think of what comes easy to you and what you do so well that you don't even think about it. Now, on the right-hand side of the paper, write 3 to 4 topics that you would like to speak about. It may be topics you already do speak about. You don't need to see yourself as an expert in any of them. And now what I would like you to do, once you have those 3 to 4 topics, is draw a line from your skills to the topics you're interested in. So let's see what you came up with. Judy, were you able to put down skills and topics?
I did. Not so much that I'm making a link right now.
Well, what skills did you put down?
The skills I put down was a Bible study leader, a writer, parenting strongly, and a traveler.
What are your topics?
I went to Bible study, leading a group in that, like at a, just leading that, teaching finances to teens, giving travel guides to the different places that I've been at, and just answering questions on how I ended up raising 2 daughters into their 40s and having them still love God and still being sane.
Well, certainly your Bible and Bible goes clearly together, but planning travel now is not just about travel, but it's about planning. You're doing planning, you're doing research, you're doing study. You can actually apply that to other things. You can apply that to leadership. You can apply that to preparing presentations. You can take your planning aspect, your research aspect, your Bible study aspect, and talk about how you plan through things. Do you do Bible preaching or sharing? Okay, that takes research. It takes a topic. It's preparing a presentation. So you can use all of that to relate directly to those types of skills and talk to people using that as a guideline. Does that make sense to you? Remember to use your skills to connect to other areas you want to talk, even if they're not directly one-to-one. How about you, Ruth? Did you have something? You're on mute. You picked up the Keith Eck version of talking on Zoom.
Well.
What are your skills?
My skills. I like to cook. I like to write. And gosh, I even like to speak.
Well, that's clear because you did your presentation. So what topics do you talk about currently?
It's all kinds of stuff related to the brain. Applied neuroscience is my jam.
Well,
so I'm thinking about maybe expanding a little bit, like how food affects your life in ways you don't realize, and how to have more fun.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about planning a meal and the ingredients and a flavor profile. So you are talking about how food affects your life, both in nutrition and in flavor. And the reaction that, go ahead.
Not really in flavor, no. I figure people know what tastes good, already. It's about how it affects your ability to focus, how it affects your moods, how it affects your emotions, how it affects your energy, all those kind of things that people may have an inkling about, but chances are they haven't really studied.
Excellent. So now you're taking your skill set, turning it into a pro set into your presentation, which is important. It's a great way of bringing more of Ruth into that presentation.
Well, I don't have a choice because my day job has to end ASAP. And this is the only way that I saw of doing that, is taking what I'm interested in, what I know, what seems to be emerging important topics in the world, and turning them into writing and speaking, and then in a few months getting paid for it.
Excellent. Well, excellent. And that's as good a motivation as any. And Chris, you have your hand up, so I'm sure that you said, or just that's just for your timer.
I had it up for the timer, but yes, I can answer it. So the 3 things that I'm good at: reading, one-on-one training, and proofreading. And then the 3 things that I put down for speaking about: job searching, Toastmasters, Gatlinburg, Tennessee. So the one-on-one trainer definitely goes to all 3 of those topics.
Well, also, what is the Gatlinburg, Tennessee? Is that historical?
It could be. It's my favorite vacation place, so I'm the little tour guide when people go there for the first time of where you should all go.
Okay. Well, the goal is, anyone else want to jump in with something? How about you, Liz?
Thank you. So I wrote down for skills, connecting people, chatting people up, learning about social psychology. And last week and the week before, I needed to come up with a speech really fast. So I went to ChatGPT and I had it give me benefits of friendship. And I've been listening to articles and books and things about that. So I think I'm going to come up with a keynote about the friendship factor, because from the audience's reaction, they seem to not know this stuff and be interested. Plus, there's an epidemic of loneliness, and friendship kind of counteracts that. So that's what I'm leaning toward. Playfulness was what I was considering before that, but you want to be friends with people who you have fun with. So I think playfulness is a subset of friendship in some ways.
And so these topics, the friendship and everything else, are all topics you're interested in.
Pretty much anything in social psychology I love.
Okay, there you go. That's perfect. That's perfect. Camilla, you had started to raise your hand. Do you have something to share?
Sure, I'll share. Thank you. So what I'm good at, connecting with people on deeper level. I'm good at learning everything I can about mindfulness, how subconscious mind works, and that. I love traveling and wine, and I'm really good at goal setting, reaching goals, and the coaching. So what I speak about is leadership and energy, which is kind of connected to my coaching. I speak about how to find your inner voice. So that goes from my learning about, everything is like subconscious related, and coaching as well. Dreams versus goals, kind of same concept. And I think those are the ones. And I think that's something that I do want to speak about is, and I haven't kind of figured it out yet, is how to see a special story in every person's story. Basically, you don't have to be that special to actually live a special life, because so many people get stuck on the fact that they don't have anything, like big and grand in their lives, and they lose sight of all the grandness they have inside.
Thank you, Camilla. As a matter of fact, that makes a great transition point for me going forward, because the reason for this exercise, more than anything else, is what makes that topic unique to you when you present it. What makes it unique to you is by what you bring to it that is you. So as you're thinking about a topic or any keynote, or even as Liz was saying, her love of social psychology, and she brings it forward, or Ruth's neuroscience. And she also talked about earlier, she provided a presentation that people said she crushed because it was unique. It was different. So when you're thinking about doing a presentation as a keynote, what makes it unique? What is Chris Poole's keynote versus Martin's keynote, even if it's the same topic? The difference is Chris and Martin. So that's what you want to think about when you're thinking a keynote, is not what the topic is, but what do you bring to it? What makes it unique because it is you? So you start there. Now, sometimes we don't recognize the uniqueness of ourselves, and we're afraid to bring ourselves into the presentation. I don't know how many of you quaked before you gave your icebreaker. I don't know about you, but I shook. I was terrified, because we're talking about ourselves, which makes us feel more vulnerable. A keynote should open our vulnerability for a couple of reasons. So I've got a question for you. Did somebody want to say something? No. I have a question for you. How many of you talk to yourself? How many of you talk to yourself out loud? I know I certainly do. You realize that 80% of our self-talk tends to be negative. It's when we're berating ourselves. We're saying we did something wrong, or we should have known better, or why didn't we do this? And sometimes we call ourselves names as well. So how we communicate with ourselves will affect whether we're willing to take a chance and try something new. So are we critical? Are we judgmental? Do we look for what's wrong first, or just described how we did it poorly and could have done it better? So this internal chatter may be residual from years of self-criticism or the criticism of others. Now, there's many, many terms for this self-talk. One is our inner critic, our gremlin. our self-critical voice, our id. It's even called psychic entropy. Now, my critical voice is left over from years of attending Catholic school in a very judgmental family. Years ago, I realized my critical voice reminded me of Sister Josepha. She became my not enough voice. She was my fourth grade teacher, and although she only stood 5 feet tall, she towered over each of us in fourth grade. Sister Josepha was my not enough voice in my head. You are not good enough. You are not quick enough. You are not strong enough. You are not tall enough. You are not smart enough. If there was a not enough in my life, Sister Josepha was there to point it out. See, what I realized I had done is I had taken this educator from fourth grade, and I had actually planted her in the garden of my mind. And then I liberally applied manure and watered heavily. Now, Sister Josepha represents good things in my life. She tells me that when there's a red light, stop. When there's a green light, go. When there's a yellow light, get through that intersection. But after growing her into something bigger than what she was, I turned her helpful voice into a voice that prevented me from doing things. She became my fear voice. Now, once I identified my critical voice, once I named my critical voice, and once I recognized that my critical voice was a component that has a purpose, see, I can thank Sister Josepha for being a part of my thought process in my life, but she isn't my controlling thought process or my entire life. Eleanor Roosevelt told us no one can make us feel inferior without our consent. So how do we plan our keynote? We actually use a simple structure, a structure that I've been going through as I've been doing this presentation. So start with a well-placed question. What was mine? Who remembers what my question was at the beginning of the presentation?
What's the purpose of a keynote?
Absolutely. There you go. So, and we need to now have an impactful opening. So, what did I do to create an impactful opening?
Yeah,
What's that?
you had a book burning. A
That's
magic
right,
trick.
the fire book. Then we introduce our premise. Now, the premise is the objective of our keynote in one sentence. Do you recall my premise? You may not. My premise was, what hot tips can I offer you to create a keynote? Then we create an emotional connection. How did I do that? Anybody can call out.
You
Yes,
are
Martin.
tired. You are tired and you're going to leave.
Martin, what were you going to say?
Story of your life.
Story of my life.
With your
What
father.
What I did is I gave you some visibility into my background. Now, you might have been able to relate to part of it. You might not have been, but it gave you an insight into me. So now I was more than just this introduction. I was now, gave you a question, gave you something to get your attention. And the fire book served the second person, not just as an impactful opening. It also served to say, oh, this is something different. I may want to pay attention. And then I actually used memorable stories. You remember my stories, right? Stan Cottrell, Sister Josepha. I'm actually creating elements of the story, and those two stories lead to the idea that we can do more than we think we can do. We just need to persist. We have to be willing to take the chance with our keynotes. In order for our keynote to have that impact, we want to take it beyond just the topic. We want to create a story that somebody will think about and say, I need to put more of myself into my keynote. We certainly did the exercise of skill sets, topics, to tie it together to get you to think about that. And most of you have already been doing some of that in all that you've done through professional speakers. But now we wanted to take it a little further. Someone saying something? I'm sorry. Okay. Edit your stories. Keep them as lean as possible. Bring them down to the edit. This is not sitting down at the coffee shop taking a half hour to talk about Stan Cottrell or to talk about Sister Josepha. Lean them down. Edit them down because you want them to get an impact that the audience is going to remember later. And remember, after the introduction, you have a question you have to answer for the audience. After you've been introduced, most of the audience is thinking, so what? So I broke the so what with the fire book as well, not just for that impact, but that was, it's something different. I don't know what's going to happen next, you know? And how can your personal skill set, which we discussed, create a connection to the audience? For instance, if someone crochets, they could actually even say, you know, crochet is about planning. It's about organizing. It's about symmetry. You can take all of those things and apply it to almost every topic and talk about how when you're planning an Afghan, a sweater, a scarf, how you think through and the types of stitches you use. And you can apply that to different topics. It's the same thing with the other things you do. So I'd even encourage you to go deeper with your skill sets than even some of the skills you said. Because, like I said, maybe you're a great gardener. Gardening requires, again, planning, coordination, thought, design. Why these flowers? Why this placement? Different things like that. And we can use those as bridges into our keynote topic as we're going through. And then we're also telling about ourselves, you know? So as executive coach and professional speech consultant, Patricia Fripp shares, all keynotes contain three elements: the start, the structure, and the story. And I know you're making notes, but you know what else you don't know? You're going to get a handout at the end of this that's going to tell you some of this. But take all the notes you want. So as we move forward to really the conclusion of the formal part of my talk, we want to now get into, here was my premise, what was my purpose? My purpose was to actually share the tips. My premise is I have some hot tips for you to create your keynote. My purpose is here are some tips which I'm sharing now. But I did it by first going through a demonstration. I laid it all out so I could refer back to it instead of saying do this, do that, do the other thing. Share on a topic that's of interest to you. So I'd encourage all of you, when you laid out your topics, if you have a topic that interests you that you haven't spoken about, try it. Try to break that habit of being in the routine of where you are and thinking about what you're good at speaking about, and see if you can take it into a little bit of a different venue. And your audience should know what you know and how you know it. That's what a keynote should present. Here's what I know. Here's how I know it. So part of that is background. Part of that is story. Part of that is demonstration. Now, always be prepared to adapt some of your points to your audience. You know, if you're talking to an audience of software developers, it's different necessarily than talking to an audience of Toastmasters. They're different areas of relating, but you can take your skills and try to find a way to relate it to what they do. What does a software development do? They have to plan out based on requirements to a program. They have to lay it out logically so it will flow. How do you do that when you're planning a meal? How do you do that when you're doing your, I'm going around, I'm missing somebody, or as Camilla, how do you do that when you're actually setting out to coach somebody to help guide them on a process going forward? So all of that is the same skill set. We just tend to think because it has a different title, it's actually different. It's really not. So as I get ready to conclude the formal portion of the presentation, I have a final demonstration. Inside this envelope, I have 4 cards. They come from a large deck of cards, and they represent the 4 queens, because after all, the creative energy in the universe, gentlemen, is the feminine. So since they represent the 4 queens, I'm going to reach in, I'm going to take out this one and this one. Camilla, I have 2 queens from that pack of 4 queens. Now, in a deck of cards, they could be red or black. These 2 are the same color. Are they red or are they black?
Red.
These are the red ones. All right. So since they're the red ones, we have the Queen of Hearts and the Queen of Diamonds. Is it Traka? Did I say that right? Traka,
Yep.
would you like the Queen of Hearts or the Queen of Diamonds?
Diamonds.
You want the Queen? Diamonds are a girl's best friend, aren't they? Okay, I'm going to take the Queen of Diamonds and I'm going to put her face up in the pack of the 4 queens, and I'll put this other one on top. Now let's recap what I said. I said this packet contained 4 queens from a deck of cards. They represent the 4 queens from a deck of cards, from a large deck of cards. I took 2 out. Camilla said they were the red queens. Traka said she wanted to use the Queen of Diamonds, and I said I placed the Queen of Diamonds face up back in the pack. Let's see how I did. There you see we have a face-up Queen of Diamonds. But Traka, I was so sure you would take the Queen of Diamonds that she actually has a different color back from a different deck. As a matter of fact, I was so sure that she's the only one that has a face. So this comes back to the point of always attempt to anticipate the needs of your audience as best you can. Try to determine how to tailor what you know and what you do to what they know and what they do. And as Patricia Fripp says, we want to put our expertise and experience in the minds of our audience. And remember, the magic is already in you. So with that, the handout is now in the chat, and you're all welcome. Take all that information and apply it to your next keynote. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you very much, Solarzar, for an awesome presentation. And now it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our #1 coach, the jovial Judy Britton.
Hang on a moment. We do have some time for Q&A if anyone has questions for Solarzar before we jump into our back to our regular agenda. Or if nobody does have questions, then we can move on with Judy.
If we have questions, let's rock and roll with questions.
Ruth.
Does anybody have a question for Solarzar?
I think Chuck does.
Okay. So, well, I haven't downloaded your document, but I'm wondering, in terms of ending a keynote, are there rules for ending a keynote? Or do you just end it in a way that makes sense for that particular topic? What do you think?
Well, I had excuse my gong, but I have 2 elements to the ending that I put in there. The quote from Patricia Fripp, which says, our keynote is about taking our expertise and experience and putting that in the minds of the audience. So in essence, that's the thought I want you to carry away. My tagline is always, the magic is already in you. So I threw that in as a second. But the real thing is, what do you want them to walk away with? That's your conclusion. As you know, we tend to not remember. After I'm done and go away, you're lucky if you remember 25% of what I said. That's the importance of the stories, because you may remember the story. And then what I'm hoping is you'll remember that last line from Patricia Fripp. Our keynote is about putting our expertise and experience in the minds of the audience. And so when you conclude your keynote, what do you want them to walk out the door with?
I would want them to be jovial.
You just wanted to get jovial in one more time. Yeah.
Well,
Trina had her hand
I
up, though.
want them to walk away feeling something, as opposed to just learning something, but feeling something.
Well, then that's where your conclusion goes. As I said, my conclusion for this presentation was that line to remind you your keynotes should create that. And that's why I want you to remember that. But your presentation, you need to leave them with what you want them to remember walking away, because they're not going to remember everything else you said. So, but Tronka has her hand up too, and has for a while. So should we? Did you have a question?
Hi, Solarzar. I want to say, one, how much I appreciate your presentation. One of the things that I'm noticing is also how your background is on brand, how your shirt is on brand, and then also tying in the magic and the props. And I think that those are important elements for us all to consider as well, is the continuity of the visual effects. And I really appreciated the book on fire. And I was also thinking about Catholic school book burnings. And I was like, and to your point about grabbing at attention and making us pay attention, I think that was also illuminated in a really potent way. And so I'm just wondering, you mentioned Patricia Fripp several times, and so are you speaking only, or are you coaching, or what else are you? What's your jam? What are you doing? Yeah.
Okay. Well, right after this, I'm having breakfast. So that's,
yes.
No, I speak, I coach, I perform. I've been focusing this year a great deal more on my magic. I have several magic coaches I'm working with, type of thing, because I'm a big kid. And for me, magic is me playing in the toy box, is what it is. And so, I do speak and I do coach. And I do admire Patricia Fripp. I've never actually had personal coaching with her. I've worked with her several times, but I really admire her tremendously.
Yes, and I know her work well. One of the things that I'm also noticing is that there's a lot of magicians turned professional speakers. And so I'm wondering, what do we know about magic and as a performer that is applicable to speakers that we can take away as well?
Well, an interesting aspect, one of my coaches always says that you'll only experience as much magic in life as you choose to believe in. It's up to you. Now, I like the idea of get away from kids' parties, but magic is about the idea of believing in something greater than ourselves. And I really believe that. And I think we can use magic in an illustrative way as that way. Now, the magic I use here, the things I use here are very simple. I use them simply because it's not about the magic. It's just about, as you said, using a prop to illustrate a point. So a magician is a performer first. He's a magician second. He's a speaker third. So if you start putting that in together, what a magician brings to the presentation is being a performer. I have to engage you. I just don't have to speak to you. I have to engage you. I have to involve you. And as we know, speaking, what do we say? 55% of it is body language. Magic is body language. So I think the magician who thinks in terms of taking an audience on a journey through a story is automatically thinking in that term when they become a speaker. Well, one of the reasons so many magicians become speakers is because they can get paid more.
For sure. And I was just thinking about the mystery and the anticipation and how you build the moment as well. I think there's something about that too. I'm just curious.
Yeah. There's an element of that. And you can do that with story as well. Everybody doesn't have to run out and become a magician overnight. But you mentioned props, and that's where Liz first encountered me, was on a session I did about the use of props. And I brought that because somebody asked me to teach people magic. I said, I'm not going to do that. I'll show you how to use props. And we forget that, as you said, in our presentations, to bring props into it, because props add that distraction. As we know, as a trainer, they tell you to only speak for 20 or 30 minutes at most before you shift the energy through an exercise or something else. Well, a prop shifts the energy, automatically. When Sister Josefa comes up with her boxing, it shifts the energy. It gets all of you thinking about your own voice. It may, even if you went to Catholic school, get you thinking about those nuns, whatever it is, but it shifts the energy, and now it's implanted a thought in you.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Gloria, you have your hand up.
Yes, I also wanted to comment beside the clothing, your fingernail polish. I thought that was very interesting. They're multicolored. So, for me, because I am not as experienced as the rest of this group, some of the names that you mentioned didn't have meaning to me. So if you added just who they were in a very short sentence, that probably would have helped me. Maybe everyone knew who they were, but I didn't. But thank you. I thought it was very interesting.
Okay, thank you. And just to let you know, the fingernail polish follows the track of the tattoos on each hand. So that's what they're for. But going back to what Trekka said earlier too, my tattoos, my polish, everything is about stage setting. And so for me, this is part of my stage.
I love it. I love how everything has intention. Do you know what I mean? Like everything is carefully thought out with purpose. And then also eliminating any distractions. Like there's nothing that wasn't carefully thought out in advance, other than the engagement piece of like what the surprise of what anybody said.
Yeah. So we're down to the last few minutes. So are there any other questions? I don't know. Yes, Martin.
Yes, first of all, with your name Solarzar, you know that the last three letters, Tsar, is the name of the Emperor of Russia, the Tsar. So this is some kind of outstanding name you have. And then, as you were asking for the cards, there are two colors, black and red. And as you dressed half in red and your background is red, is there some kind of manipulation so that you can eliminate 50% of the colors by dressing in red or putting a lot of red, so leading your audience towards red?
Actually, Martin, I'm not that clever. So the answer is no. But thank you. Now, the background is because it's a...
Well, fellow Toastmasters, I see Chris has the red